So I've hit the main ideas of what the press, the kind of models through history, but I just kind of wanted to hit a couple things in a separate video that that I want to kind of just touch upon. And one is one of the things they mentioned later on is, that there's definitely other examples of this going on. There's other groups that do it. But there's a few kind of key concepts I just kind of want to highlight. One is that they talk about in religion that, to a certain degree, some people say St. Paul, who was a Christian, early Christian, who wrote a lot of what is in the Christians' book called the New Testament. Paul wrote letters, like Thessalonians, and I think he wrote Thessalonians, and he wrote like about, I forget how many, but he wrote the majority of the books in the New Testament, in that they were letters to different churches. And they say, he's kind of a good example of this. He takes his audience, he segments it. He says this is an audience by location, but it's also audiences based upon, Jewish converts versus Gentile converts versus young versus old versus churches with large women populations and female leaders and ones without it. And he basically tailors his message and writes a different epistle or letter to each one of them. And so he's kind of a perfect example of effective communication or effective public relations, in that he's relating the church, the organization, to each of those different segments. He segmented the population and begins to do it. And I think that's kind of one of the keys to public relations, is the idea that we segment and we don't just look at it as just members of the church, but we rather look at age, demographics, and other things. And he did a very good job with that. Some of the other things they talk about is they mentioned pseudo events. I just kind of want to hit a few key ideas. Pseudo events are basically events that aren't really events. They're kind of just designed. In legislation, bill signings are kind of pseudo events. They put up a table, ask everybody to come in, take pictures, and they sign a bill. Or ribbon cuttings are pseudo events. They're not a real event. When they get out that shovel and everybody pushes the dirt, they're not really starting to dig anything. There's not like they're being helpful by doing it. They usually have somebody come through and till up the ground and kind of loosen it up so that they don't have to lift much. They can really get a good shovel full of dirt and have fun with it. It's a pseudo event. The Boston Tea Party is also an example they give. That to a large degree was symbolic of something else that was going on, and it wasn't necessarily an actual riot that threw tea into it was all staged. It was like they invited the media, they got everything together, and they said, we're going to dump this tea, and that was kind of the end of it. That these were pseudo events, they weren't real. And so one thing about PR is they do that kind of thing, and something just kind of to think about. As far as it goes, some of the motives for good public relations, one is recruitment. One is the idea that one thing to think about with public relations is it goes beyond just, relating these, but oftentimes people who are thinking about going to a school or taking a job usually will look at the social media. How do they rate? How do they do? They might look to see if the companies has positive reviews from their employees on job sites. They might look at the social media accounts of workers. They might see what people are saying. Nobody really wants to, unless they're desperate for a job, work for a company that's just horrible. You kind of want to work for a company that's well respected and well regarded. Nobody wants to, I don't know too many people who probably dream or desire to be working for something that's evil or negative, that's thought negatively of. The other thing about media is there's a certain level of legitimacy that can come from public relations and media. That one of the things we talk about in there is that like search engines can become a sign of positive media. One thing to keep in mind is there's what we call search engine optimization. And there's a discussion board on this, so it makes sense I talk a little bit about it. One thing is there's what we call like people who come to your website organically. Organically means they just come to it naturally. And for example, suppose I do something, suppose I own a business and I decide to post that, we're having a sale on, sandwiches, and these sandwiches are delicious. We hope you'll come out on Tuesday and get a sandwich. Now I can get that into other people's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter feeds by paying a fee to the company, to Twitter, Facebook, and other companies in order for it to show up as paid or sponsored advertising. And that's great. The other thing is people who will then take that and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're serving the McRib. The McRib is back. The McRib is back, right? And they'll post that on their social media accounts and they'll talk about how great that is. And that would be considered organic when the people post about the McRib, take pictures of themselves eating the McRib, doing things like that, versus paid advertising, which is done through actually paying them to put the ad out there. Now, what happens is the more people who link to your website, who talk about your website, who link to it, it's linked to other things, will boost its prominence in searches. So when somebody types in the word like good sandwiches, maybe the McRib comes up, or maybe it's that Popeye's chicken sandwich that people were like killing each other over or something. I don't know. I think there was one that was like supposedly a really delicious Popeye sandwich that was supposedly big deal a year or two ago from when I made this video. Those would be what we call, those would be things that might come up when you type in good sandwiches or good local sandwich shop or something like that. And so what happens is that's what we call search engine optimization. It comes about from people linking to it, people talking about it, and there's algorithms that allow you to do it. There's ways to cheat that system a little bit in that if you have a social media account and you post on other people's accounts that have lots of hits, and then those people post back on yours, it raises your prominence in social media and your stuff comes up higher than other people's. And so that's one of the things that we call search engine optimization. And one thing that PR can do is it can try to focus on that. And when you become the number one thing, when you say great local, what's the best horseshoe in Springfield? Well, let's just type that in to a search engine real quick. I'll share my screen with you real quick. All right. And let's just say Google, we'll say best horseshoe in Springfield, Illinois. I did not search this before. And the first thing that comes up is Dublin Pub. Next is Boone Saloon. Next is Obed and Isaac's. I've had the Dublin Pub when I think that's really the only horseshoe I've ever had because I didn't grow up in Springfield and I'm not like a connoisseur of them. I don't really, in all honesty, think that much of it. Their horseshoe seems very good. I have no complaints about it. Maybe I had one somewhere else, but anyway, but that provides, because now when you type that in, Dublin's Pub has basically optimized its search results, whether it be by people talking about it being the best or it winning prizes or whatever. This is something, it confers legitimacy. Boone Saloon, Obed Isaac's, and Dublin's all have some legitimacy because they come up high in that search engine. And sometimes by just being in the media, by being out there, PR can get you out there and get you recognized, and that can confer legitimacy on your business or company as something that has actually made it. Other things to keep in mind is you can use social media for agitation. Agitation is kind of negative, where you're trying to get people not to do things. And advocacy, which is kind of the same thing, where you're trying to get people to do things positive, like support people who are being hurt. Agitation, negative, maybe boycott something. And then last thing is, obviously, PR can be used for profit, and we'll talk more about that coming up. And propaganda can also be it. Propaganda comes from the word to propagate. To propagate means to spread, and so propaganda comes from the word to spread. Okay, so I just kind of want to talk about a few of those, and I hope all that works. Talk to you later.